the recording. Yeah, we're recording. So welcome everybody to session 2 of Masters of Destiny. So I'm really excited to share with you sort of what has been pulled together for this particular session as we build up going into some really profound ninth wave information. So what I'm going to try and do as well is, as I was actually going through the development work for this, I realized how much information and stuff is there. So there's one or two things that I've actually left out of today's session that were on the original agenda when I saw how much was actually going in. So what I'll probably do is, we've got 2 extra sessions scheduled, is use part of one of the extra ones to fill in that gap. So you'll see as we go through. It's not a huge amount that's missing, but I just thought I'm going to need a bit of time to explain this one particular section. So we'll work with what we have. So that's just in respect of what we're going to be covering today. But what I'd like to find out from you guys before we sort of launch into session 2 is if you've had any insights, any experiences. Did you go talk to your trees? I know Rachel did, because she gave us a wonderful light language on Facebook. Did you connect with your trees? Did you have a go with the spiral? What did you experience? Any awarenesses that dropped in as a consequence of the first session?
I have to tell you, we were traveling, so I walked out behind our the building, the hotel we were in, and it was hard. No, we were at a stop, a gas station stop, and I couldn't walk in where the trees were because it was like I couldn't really see where I'd be going. But the leaves were over on next to the car, so I held on to one of the leaves, and my thought was, well, I'm just holding on to the leaf. I'm not holding on to the tree. And clear as day, I heard the tree say to me, you're getting, there's as much strength in the leaf. We carry all that's in the tree. So I was like, whoa. And then I heard a little bit more, and again, this was over a week ago, about that. Not only do they carry the whole essence, but they're connected to the tree and to everything in the grid work of the roots, connected globally. So I thought it was very interesting to hold on to this. And the leaf was, I mean, it was little. We're not talking any big leaf.
Yeah.
So that was pretty exciting. That was the most that I got.
Yeah, Bunny, that's absolutely beautiful, because that is part of the whole concept of the holographic universe and the holograms. So the whole of the tree is actually in the leaf. So to me, that's yes, really profound. And then that's a very real awareness that you weren't expecting, because you weren't connecting with the tree trunk. So that's just beautiful.
It was sort of funny because it was almost like, I could almost hear the voice like, really, if it were me talking, but really, Bonnie, we're all here, you silly girl. It was very lighthearted, the message, the way it came through.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So that's also really important to recognize that it's not just the hologram of the physical tree, that holographically you're connecting right back to the tree at the center of the universe, the original source, through that blueprint, through the blueprint of the physical tree. Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions, any comments, any insights, anything that you gained from the first week?
I'll comment if that's okay.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a sore tongue because I've been so busy the last few days,
Oh.
But it's been wonderful. But one of the things I've noticed, because I connect with the trees a lot anyway, and when I was with my friend on Thursday, one of the things I'd never done before was to collect the resin from the trees. And of course she does a lot of like Native American plant medicine and all sorts of things, and we were walking through the trees up in the woods, and I've noticed it before where the resin's dripping, but never thought to collect it before. And so we had little bags that she'd brought along, and she'd collected some soil and few bits and pieces, you know, just to do some kind of work with. And it was the first time I'd actually collected the resin and smelt the resin, and it was so sticky and everything, but there was a different connection to the trees because of that. It was different from sitting under the trees or touching the leaves or with my, you know, touching the bark. There was something different. I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
But it was because it was so sticky, and it was there all the way around with me as I was walking, you know. And then when we went to the yew tree, and I was underneath, I've been there many, many times, but there was a different feeling. That's all I can say. And I've never done light languages there before, probably because I was probably new to doing it the last time I went, and I hadn't really, you know, didn't really feel to do it, but it was just spontaneous and it just needed to come through. And there was just this joy being underneath the tree, a different type of connection. And we were talking about how trees connect to one another, and how one of the things she said to me was that if, like, for instance, my son being up in Scotland, if there's a similar type of tree that I know of where he lives, I can go and connect with a tree, the same type of tree, and then connect with him through the connection of the two trees together. And I'd never thought of that before, even though when I went to Glastonbury many years ago and touched the yew trees in Chalitwell Gardens, I felt like, or my friend and I, a different friend who had gone with me then, we felt like we were taking a message between the trees, between the yew tree up here and the yew trees in Chalitwell. We didn't know what that was, but we just felt that there was this, you know, and that came back to me the other day. So that, yeah, there was almost like this speaking and reminding of some kind of, you know.
Yeah. That's wonderful, because I think as everything that's unfolding in respect of the ninth wave influences is a remembering from within of all of that ancient wisdom, which is held by the trees, in order to be able to bring all of that forward moving into the future. So it's kind of like remembering that you know that.
Yeah.
So that it contributes to the wholeness and the perspective and the hologram in the moment. It's like repairing those holograms.
Yeah, but there's also been, for me, I mean, you know, I notice trees all the time anyway. It is my thing that I see. But there's also been this recognition of other trees that I wouldn't normally look at or wouldn't normally be aware of, especially over the last few days where we've been traveling around so much. And there's been this real connecting to this part of the world and to the world in general, not just to Wales, you know. This real connecting and knowing our place as being connected to the earth. And I mean, I've always felt that anyway, but there's been just something different.
It's just heightened.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
okay, lovely. Thank you, ladies. Anyone else have anything they'd like to contribute before we launch in?
I just want to say, Rachel, first, I love that connection between you and your son with Through the Trees. I love it. But I don't know if I have language for this, but I'm replaying the beginning of it for my husband, because I wanted him to hear about the science behind the universe. And I know when I was little, and it's carried all through adulthood, that idea of, you know, we talk about God, we talk about the divine, where does it come from? I mean, to me, that's the eternal question. But when you were talking, Julie, about to me, it's all the sacred geometry around the entire universes, galaxies. It clicked a little bit more, made more sense of the benevolence around it, and where it comes from. When my daughter was, you know, I kept trying to say to my daughter, who's, you know, like, I don't believe in God, I don't believe any of that stuff. She's very close to the earth. And I said, look at how perfect seasons are, how the plants know how to do things. So this, to me, is exactly what I couldn't put words to, because I didn't know the science behind it, but just knew that there was some underlying structure around our world and around what goes on in the universes and the galaxies.
Absolutely.
So it was really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's fantastic. When I did the Alara Canfield show the other day, we did an interview, and she she was kind of going, okay, oh, that's really interesting. I don't understand the science behind it, but I'm quite happy for you to do that work, and then I can actually learn it from you. And I went, that's my job, you know, is to support that understanding so that you don't have to go wading through all of that stuff. So I hope this does actually add some meaning and substance. Did you want to say something, Katie?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say I enjoyed the first session, and I've read the Holographic Universe a couple of times, actually.
Yeah.
And so much of what you're talking about also relates to the different cultures, and that the cosmic cultures as well as the earth culture. And since that's part of the work that I do through my art, it was just wonderful. I can't even express how it just felt like so many connections, energetic connections, were coming together, and I'm so looking forward to today. So
that's fantastic. Thank you. And that is ultimately what happens, and that is the gift of the diamond. It's not as much prescriptive as it is about creating the links so that gets switched on within each and every individual, so the connections that each person needs to make are made, that it comes into a cohesive whole. And I think that's the beautiful thing about all of the diamond work, whatever I've done, and that's what I hear from people so often, and Rachel knows, it's like, A, it feels as if I've come home, and B, I can see all of the connections with everything that I've done in my life. You know, so that's a beautiful gift. Thank you, Katie, to hear that. And we've got somebody down on the screen here who's just saying iPad, and I'm not sure who it is. There's no name there. Hi.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, I'm Joe.
Oh, is that Joe? Oh, lovely to see you, Joe. So glad you could make it and your camera's on. That's okay, fantastic. Oh, wonderful, Joe. So was there anything that you actually experienced, found from the first session that was meaningful?
No, I similarly connect with trees quite a lot anyway, and I did manage to keep up the tree connection for another few days afterwards. But what I always feel from my ash tree is I get a sacral and root healing. Basically, I don't get images or information, although subconsciously I probably am.
Yeah.
But I just feel my sacral and root chakra just totally like throbbing and expanding, and I get a lot of warmth. So I think what I get mostly from my tree is healing.
Yeah.
And the information not.
Yeah. And you don't sometimes, and often we don't need to know the hows or the details, just being in trust that it is actually happening and that you have that connection. So yeah, lovely. Okay, so if nobody's got anything else that they'd like to add, we've got the chat room up. Can you see it on the side of the screen?
Yep.
So I am going to put the screen share on with the presentation. And we'll get going with today. So if there's any comments or questions, please stick them into the chat area. If you could all mute yourselves down here, so a couple of you have already, that would be fantastic. And then we can open it up a little bit later on for some Q&A. I don't want to touch the record button. So let's do a screen share. Get the slideshow. Okay, you guys can all see that? Yeah. Okay, the cosmos speaks. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at the first 5 waves, and it's when we hit the 5th wave that we really begin to get into the meat and bones of some of the human history that we actually understand, but it's part and parcel of bringing the alignment through. There's an incredible amount that goes along with the 5th wave. not only the niceties of the indigenous peoples and those ancient cultures, but it's where the ego was actually birthed, was in that particular wave sequence. So again, I'm going to bring in some information for you that's not in the Nine Waves book, which overlays what we know and understand really beautifully, and will add to the way in which we can work with it. Okay, so I loved these quotes because I found them pretty meaningful. And that is, so often as human beings, this is the paradox. One of the paradoxes is understanding that there is a simplicity to everything, and yet understanding that we live in an age of incredible complexity. And in fact, the ninth wave, with the frequency and the information that it brings, does bring with it a great deal of complexity. We are learning to simplify as much as possible that complexity so that we can bring that into being in an embodiment through our lives. So I love this quote, which was, abandon the urge to simplify everything, to look for formulas and easy answers, and begin to think multidimensionally, to glory in the mystery and the paradoxes of life, not to be dismayed by the multitude of causes and consequences that are inherent in each experience, to appreciate the fact that life is actually complex. And that's M. Scott Peck. Love it. Very, very insightful writer. And in a lot of the diamond work, we've spoken a lot about paradoxes, that in strengthening our diamond field, and in strengthening our ability to embrace and connect and align with the frequencies of the ninth wave, there is, by its very nature, an ability to hold those paradoxes or polarities within our form. So really powerful insight. And this was another lovely one. Simplicities are enormously complex. Consider the sentence, I love you. And that I also thought was incredibly insightful. I don't know who this author is. I've never come across him before, but I love the quote, because that's one of the things that I do say about the diamond is it's elegant in its simplicity in respect of the simple form of this shape, and yet it is profound and complex in its understanding, in its application, in its meaning. So there's an incredible depth of meaning that goes with it. So it's holding the simplicity and the complexity arm in arm as one of the incredible paradoxes of life, so that we don't swing either way. We don't get lost in the complexities, and we don't want to inherently just simplify everything, which is what happens a lot of the time with so many of the teachings out there. So I just really wanted to lead in with that. Okay, so we're talking today about the cosmic operating systems and the GPS, the operating holograms and the realities that they actually create, so the impact that they have on us, because those realities that have been collectively agreed upon, not just our own personal realities, because we co-create realities and we are part of a collective agreement. So those realities that have been agreed and that continue to play out as a consequence of the initial waves, and how we are actually serving to adjust those holograms. The Akasha, that's really, but very briefly, we're going to look at the Akasha, because for me, this understanding of the spirals of time simplifies our understanding of what the Akasha actually is. Waves 1 to 5. Mu or Lemuria and Atlantis in context, ancient cataclysms, origins of trauma and the birth of the ego, upgrading your brain, and some energy exercises and processes that you can work with in respect of supporting the upgrades of your brain. And a lot of this has to do with the holding of the opposites, because that tension actually helps to create new neural pathways, as in this whole concept of neural plasticity. So it's the tension of opposites helps to upgrade your brain and staying aligned. So that's a brief overview of that. Now, this also was putting the 9 waves into perspective, because we speak very often about the concept of light and that everything is light. Everything is light, whether it's visible or invisible. All is light. All that we can see is light. All that we cannot see is also light. But light, and light in and of itself, all of it is an emanation from source. And light, as in photons, actually carry information. So each photon actually has information. So essentially, the light and the light of source is the hard drive of this operating system that we live within. The operating system itself, if we want to use the computer analogy, so that's the box, that's the computer system. The meaning that we actually apply is dependent upon the downloads into mind and the holograms that each of the 9 waves deliver. So the 9 waves are actually the operating system. So source is the box. The operating system is like your Windows. So you can't use the box unless you've actually got the operating system that sits on top of that you can then work with. So to me, that's pretty straightforward. So the 9 waves bring the information. But what we do with them is dependent upon our ability to decode that information and then apply it. So we, in essence, are the programmers or the software. So that is an overview of the relationship that we have. So it's important to be able to understand each time there's a new wave that comes through, the operating system is upgraded. So you've seen this analogy, I think, with a lot of people working in this environment. You know, it's like an upgrade to Windows 10. That's really where we're at the moment. We're upgrading with the 9th wave that's come in to Windows 11 or whatever it might be. It's a brand new operating system that's actually coming in. So we're learning to reprogram on the basis of a new operating system, okay, as programmers. So we need to adjust our capabilities and advance our capabilities to be able to program with this new operating system. You can't program it the same way that you could actually program wave 7 or wave 5, okay? So the 9 waves provide us with context and meaning. And this is done through the neural pathways that have been laid down in our brains through the continuum of life. So the kind of meaning that we attribute, we could say it's the way that we actually perceive life, is dependent upon our conditioning. Our conditioning determines what those neural pathways are. However, it's not only in this lifetime, it is also dependent upon the development of the human brain and the way that it has been fractured through some of the earlier waves, and we're busy repairing that so that we can upgrade the operating system and program effectively, so that we can put things into new and improved and higher context and meaning. So we need to shift and change and adapt the neural pathways so that we can perceive and give meaning to life in a different way. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah? You're all right with that? Cool. And I loved this quote at the bottom of the screen. Now I've got the pictures overlaying that, so I don't know about you guys. Let me see if I can move it up there. This is from a Scandinavian alchemist shaman who's gone right back to his roots and works with a lot of alchemical processes. And I love this because this starts to give meaning, and you'll see why this is significant as we get through the various waves, that we are tasked to build upon the foundation of the ancestors, to heal the fragmentations within our psyche and restore the integrity of our connection to source. And that was so meaningful when I started drawing out the information of the 5th wave, because that is essentially where the ancestral energies and essences came into being, and it's where the fragmentation actually happened. So I found that quote, and he doesn't work with the 9 waves, he works with alchemy in his own way, and I thought that is so relevant especially when we discover what the meaning of Lemuria actually is. So quite a fascinating connection there. So I love bringing in the work of different people and how each overlays and adds a depth of meaning to that. So the ancestors were responsible for providing the context and meaning and the neural pathways with which the human journey actually was initiated. As always, if there are any questions, just let me know. Let me put the chat room up just so that I can keep that handy. There we go. Whoops. I can't do that. Okay, so this was also particularly interesting, starting to look at different cultures and bringing things into context. And I love the patterning in this image because, of course, you can see, you might notice what it is that I'm looking at as all of the diamonds. And this is a Hopi creation myth that actually emerges from the fifth wave, which is the first wave where there was human consciousness. The world at first was endless space in which existed only the creator, Taiwan. This world had no shape, no time, no life, except in the mind of the creator. Eventually, the infinite creator created the finite Sochuknang, whom he called his nephew to establish the 9 universes. So here from the Hopi culture, we find again this reference to the sacred number 9. So I'm going to carry this thread through as we work through the various sessions so that you can begin to perhaps appreciate the depth of connection that these ancient cultures had and the understanding that they had in respect of their connection to source. So again, we have this connection to the number 9, and we find the hidden patterning in their tapestries. Look at that, it's just all diamonds wherever you look in the weaving of their tapestries, and Grandmother Spider. Sochuknang also created Spider-Woman, who served as a messenger for the creator and was an intercessor between the source and the people. In some versions of the Hopi creation myth, it was she who creates all life under the direction of Sochuknang, the finite. Spider-Woman is a metaphor for she who creates from a central source. One day it is she who will pull all of her creation back to her source. And this is the 9th wave that we're talking about. So the 9th wave is Spider-Woman pulling all of creation back into this unification so that there is this alignment with source through all 9 universes, 9 worlds, whichever way you want to look at it. Her web represents the grids or matrix of our reality, the spider web effect. Spider-Woman's web links you to everything and everybody in our reality. It is how we learn to be psychic and to connect telepathically. And of course, as I have said for so many years, for those who've been in the diamond community for so long, the diamond light grid, as I speak about it, is the eternal grid that interconnects everything. It is our organic internet. It is our web of life. And as we go through subsequent sessions, I want to build on that because we want to be able to develop and enhance our innate telepathic abilities to utilize connections through that grid. So that's just really weaving in some of the mythology and looking at the parallels of information. Now, this is also particularly interesting in respect of how we perceive ourselves, because this quote I found by Goethe, the German philosopher. Soul of man, you are like water. Destiny of man, you are like the wind. Because we're talking specifically about becoming a master of destiny. But in order to become a master of destiny, we have to be able to crystallize our soul essence in its pure form within our bodies. So if we look at the elements of water and the magic of water, most of you will have seen this work by Dr. Masaru Emoto, which has just become so well known now with the crystallization water crystals. And it perhaps gives us an opportunity to be able to relate to the uniqueness and the beauty of our own soul, because every single droplet of water crystallizes in its own unique pattern and has its own unique vibration dependent upon the words that are spoken, the frequencies that are spoken, and it is the ability to then crystallize that in its purity. If we still have outdated holograms playing out in our psyche as a consequence of some of the earlier waves, we will find that we are not able to crystallize our soul essence through our body and in our body perfectly with this wisdom, because we're still carrying and connected to those earlier waves. And in fact, that's why the waters upon our planet look like this. The polluted waters of our planet hold no shape and hold no form, and then they just blown about with the wind, if you like. So an uncrystallized, unpurified soul is not able to achieve or realize its destiny. It's subjected to the whims of fate itself. There is no conscious choice. So we, as masters or developing masters, connect with the ability to make conscious choices to crystallize our soul essence like water. So I just thought that quote had a lot of depth to it, that we could perhaps look at these images and recognize and realize the beauty of who we are as individuals, and know that the embodiment of that is going to take us forward on our journey, and that this purification process through all 9 waves helps us to realize this. We are purifying our individual embodiments of soul so that the memory of our beauty and essence becomes the guide for our destiny and for the collective destiny of humanity and for others. So we actually have quite an enormous job to do. It's very simple, and yet it's very complex. And we know that you just need to speak to water and you can change its structure and form. In so many ways. It's really and truly a beautiful gift that we have and that we bring through the awareness. So let's have a recap. I've just pulled this chart up again in respect of the 9 waves. We looked at this in the first session, because today we're just going to have a look at waves 1 to 5. Each of the subsequent sessions, we're going to really focus in on each of the individual waves and healing some of the holograms within those waves. So waves 1 to 5, we look back at, and we can see that the first wave is the crystallization of matter up to the establishment of culture. And it was the 5th wave here, which is where humanity launched into and became modernized in a sense. This 5th wave, which was like a massive, massive turning point in so many ways for humanity, because there was a large degree of impartiality, if you like, in respect of these earlier waves. It was man, with the development of his consciousness and the application of that really changed the course to an extent of our destiny, and used the information of the subsequent waves to his own end, in a detrimental way, the effects of which we're still paying the price for. So the first 5 waves, let's have a look at them, because I've now broken them down. You guys are quite clear with that. And then by the time we actually get up to this 9th wave, we know that we are harnessing this, and I just wanted to mention this. The 5th wave is unpolarized. It is unfiltered to a large extent. So it's unfiltered. The 9th wave is unfiltered. So what we are doing is we are building a bridge between the 9th wave and the new information, and weaving that down to the 5th wave, so that then impacts the totality of creation. So this is quite an enormous job. So understanding what happened and took place during the 5th wave is really significant and important. So let's have a look. Evolution in and of itself is a universal process. So even though we speak about this from an understanding that we are evolving, as we evolve, the whole of life evolves, because whatever we take from the holograms of the ninth wave, as I said, is actually filtered down. It all supports our alignment. The more in alignment we are, the more and deeper that information can actually filter down through those earlier waves, bringing everything into unification. So it's a universal process. It is the plant kingdom. It is the animal kingdom. It is unicellular organisms. It is matter itself. And that is really quite fascinating, because they have, in recent years, what physicists once thought were untouchable laws of physics have been shown to be going through minute, minuscule changes. So nothing is fixed in the way that it actually used to be in respect of the non-mutable laws of physics. So there's some really interesting stuff happening. So the first wave, as we saw, gave rise to the fundamentals of matter. It was the wave that brought the information and the glue that holds it all together. At its fundamental basis, it's the energy, the information that served to structure the atoms that went to make up the molecules and the different characteristics of each of the elements, the creation of star systems, galaxies, planets that could support life, elements, molecules, crystals, minerals, rocks, and single-celled life. And when one thinks about the wavelength of this wave that took place over an incredibly extended period of time, this whole birthing of the support system for the universe. So right down to the cells, to the atoms that make up our bodies, we still hold the effects of the first wave in every molecule and atom of our being. So we start seeing the enormity of our connection with the universe, because all of these previous waves run through the totality of life. Okay? So that's the first wave. So just think about it at the cellular level. That first wave is still impacting and running through you, and it's dictating, you know, sort of the very fact that you are glued together in embodiment in this physical form. So the second wave was responsible for the emergence of plants and animals as receivers and transmitters of divine information without the application of consciousness, like trees. So trees receive and then they transmit, they give back out. They just sharers of those holograms. So the oldest trees on the planet can give us insights into the world that existed way before our current time. They receive and they transmit into the field. There was, during the second wave, this split into genders. So where the first wave is genderless, it's really just the fundamental structures. The second wave, we started seeing the application of the inherent polarization in the universe through genders in respect of animals, procreation, even plants, because different trees have different genders. You get female trees and male trees, female flowers, male flowers, hence all of the pollination. You get male parts and female parts. So the pollen has to be transferred from the stamens through to the receptacle in plants, in flowers, in order for that plant to be able to procreate. So you find this gender polarization at the very fundamental second wave level. It's very instinctual, and it is the source of our instincts. So those instincts come from the second wave insights and understanding. It's the animalistic heritage. You just have to look at the development of the human embryo and the stages that it goes through. You know, sort of, it looks reptilian, it looks, you know, animal-like, fish-like. It goes through all of those stages in development where it resembles the very stages and evolutionary developments of life itself. So it's quite easy to perhaps see our connection to these fundamental waves that flow through us. So the second wave was the first embodiments of spiritual energy, of ethereal energy. And that life is continuing to evolve as we are with the new wave. So the plant kingdoms and the animal kingdoms are actually evolving as the waves are bringing new information into being. And this is really interesting because then we start looking around. Remember, we spoke about the extinction cycles and that we are going through a massive extinction cycle at the moment. And sometimes those extinction cycles are absolutely necessary in order for new life and new operating systems to emerge. So it's new life that will support the new operating systems coming into being and that help to repair the earth. So we find, for instance, and all of the prophecies from the indigenous peoples of the fifth wave spoke about the sacred white animals, whether that came out of Africa, whether it came out of America, whether it came out of the Southern Americas. They all speak about the sacred white animals, that these are the embodiments of new information. They signal times of great change to us and for us. So they come in with the encodings for the new wave already, and they started appearing in tandem with the eighth and particularly with the ninth wave. So we saw more. It's why we see more and more and more of these sacred white animals appearing: white squirrels, white peacocks, white elephants, white game, African game, white lions, white, all of the animal kingdom, white butterflies, white ravens, you know, sort of we're seeing those species emerging. So it's not something that we should actually dismiss. And then plant communications. And one thing that was really interesting for me was this thing about albino redwoods. So it's part and parcel of what we're seeing as an evolution in the plant kingdom. And in fact, the redwoods are some of the most ancient trees on the planet. So this is interesting that it's the redwoods that are giving us a demonstration of that evolution through what's happening with them. Is that in very recent years, what researchers have discovered is what are called albino redwoods. So these are pure white redwoods. So these leaves have no chlorophyll, so they cannot metabolize their own sugars and food using the sun, because traditional plant life actually does exactly that. It uses chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, to trap the sun's rays to then convert that through photosynthesis into food and nutrients. Well, the white redwoods can't do that because they've got no chlorophyll. So they have found these albino, as they call them, or the white redwoods, in symbiotic relationship with traditional redwoods. So they're getting their nourishment from the normal redwoods. However, both are surviving. So it's not that it's a parasite that is actually feeding off its host. It is a new partnership that is developed through the appearance of these new plants. And when they did some more research, and this has just been very recent in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, what they discovered was that the white redwoods had heavier concentrations of heavy metals, or higher concentrations of heavy metals in their leaves. And when they extended their research, the conclusion that they came to was that the white redwoods are somehow filtering out the toxins from the forest, acting as toxic filters for the traditional redwoods, these ancient forests, so that those trees could continue to survive. So they're filtering the toxicity from our environment through their relationship. So this is quite a massive evolutionary step that we see in respect of the plant kingdom. So in essence, you know, we could look at the white animals and say, well, are they actually filtering through and processing some of the toxins of our environment so that we can thrive in the new environment? So they're appearing as a warning, as a beacon that our environment is actually becoming hugely toxic. And if you look back at a lot of the myths, those were the warnings that the ancient indigenous peoples gave us with the appearance of these sacred animals, that it was a time when humanity actually had to change and begin to act differently. So this is a recent evolutionary application that has been found in the plant kingdom. And to me, this was truly fascinating. So it gives us a new perspective on the way in which life is evolving. So you guys all right with that? I hope you find it as fascinating as I do, because when I sort of pull these things out, I go, this is just quite mind-blowing when you look at it. You start looking at the plant kingdoms, at the entirety of life in such a different way, because that ninth wave and this new energy is impacting everything. So the third wave, as that appeared, saw the emergence of the primates and a progression from the quadrupeds, or the four-legged beings, to two-legged, because the primates then had the ability to use all four limbs to move, as well as their tails and all of the rest of it, but they also had the ability to walk on two legs. So this was kind of the precursor to the emergence of some of the human species that then came about. So larger brains with increased polarization, so that's left and right brain, that we were actually seeing with the primates. And this was a precursor in respect of the information that came with the third wave to the development of mind and behaviors that then became part of our human and human-like characteristics. We only have to look at the primate families to be able to see some of the similarities in the way that they behave given certain circumstances. So the primates, and it was like the primates had to evolve from the fundamental animal kingdom in order to provide the infrastructure for humanity and the human form to follow it. So each wave with the download of information and mind has been absolutely necessary in order for us to evolve to get to the point where we're at now. It could not have happened any other way. So that aspect, the divine or universal mind, was downloaded in respect of primate developments with the third wave. So what the fourth wave brought us was the initial human beings. And again, expanding brains and increasing in size. They were largely hunter-gatherers, driven more by instinct than by reasoning. They had no concepts necessarily, though those primal humans had no concepts of divine origins, and they learned to use tools. So this was during the fourth wave. So the increase in brain capacity gave them the ability to begin to understand and work with different tools to be able to meet their needs. But all of their life would have been centered around food, procreation, and safety. Sort of those primal human characteristics and needs. Almost very animalistic, but we see this progression in respect of brain size very, very succinctly. So it's moving from the primates into the initial human beings. What's interesting about the fourth wave is that the fourth wave of those human beings actually stayed very, very stable for millions of years. And the characteristics of the humans that actually lived during that time period just didn't change, aside from learning how to use tools. So, possibly inventing the wheel and some basic tools. Nothing much changed during that particular time. During the fifth wave, which increased in frequency again, which is sort of between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago, in respect of bringing into play the pre-wave, is when we see everything beginning to change rapidly. And of course, we've got this increase in frequency of the fifth wave as well, which is hugely significant. So we see this massive shift in brain capacity from something like, I think it's 500 cc's in respect of brain size from the fourth wave right up to 1500 cc's in some of the modern humans that appeared during the fifth wave. So it was here during the fifth wave that we see humans actually creating and developing the ability to communicate with language. We see mental development. So here we see the beginnings of emotional connectivity, ability, the emergence of consciousness, a physically shifted, sleeker anatomy. We also see the beginnings of the left brain coming into play through the frequencies and the development within this fifth wave. And this was in the fifth wave where I said that this wave of essence and energy was unfiltered, so it was automatically connected with otherworldly realms, and it fostered the development of those concepts of divine source. So this is where we see some of the mythologies and the stories beginning to arise that have been passed down through word of mouth from 100,000 years ago. Okay, so from divine source. It is the fifth wave that is the origin of all of the First Nations peoples. And in fact, the Khoisan in Africa, they did some genetic linking back. So we've got modern science validating this, that their genetic profiling and the diversification of their genes has been taken all the way back to 80,000 years ago. So 80,000 years ago is smack bang an origin within the realm of the fifth wave. So this, and it wasn't only the Khoisan. They've been identified as one of the most ancient races of peoples upon the planet, the Khoisan of South Africa. However, you had the emergence of the Aboriginals in Australia, and we see their gene pool actually spreading out, as well as the ancient peoples of the South Americas. And I'm talking the really ancient Aboriginal, you know, your Amazonian peoples, the ancient indigenous peoples of the Asias, etc. So we see clusters of cultural development popping up all over the world at the same time, because the new encodings were downloaded with this fifth wave. So that's part of it. So the fifth wave is the origin of all creation stories, which influenced the cultures that were forming and was informed and influenced by the cultures that were forming in different geographical locations. So their mythological stories would have been woven around the particular environment that they were in, but central to many of them is this concept of the serpent, the wave-like form of the wave that delivered the information that supported their life and understanding. They were all able to somehow connect in with this wave form, which was the delivery of divine information. The Aboriginals talk about the rainbow serpent. The Khoisan, their creation myth revolves around the serpent. The ancient South American peoples actually refer to the origin of life associated with the serpent. So you find this as a common theme or a common myth story throughout all of the ancient cultures. So it's like through this unfiltered consciousness, they were tapping into this wave. This is where we see the origin of ceremonies and rituals, the origin of art, the ability to communicate symbolically, and the origin of symbolism. It was approximately, there's been some cave art, I think, that trace back as much as 50, 60,000 years ago, some of the cave art with symbols etched on it, with actual drawings on the cave walls. So that's squarely within the fifth wave development of culture. And that was the first time that we actually see individuals constructing ceremonies to see their loved ones off onto a different path once they'd actually died. So that's where we see the origin of all of these death-based and burial ceremonies. There's evidence of that right around the world. This is also, because it's unfiltered, was their connection to the original diamond consciousness that was interpreted on the basis of their limited capacity and the mind holograms of the fifth wave. So because, bear in mind what I was just saying, all of these waves are operating through us. This becomes part of our modern fascination with shamanic practices and the indigenous peoples, because with the ninth wave emerging now, which is also unfiltered, which represents our connection to diamond consciousness, what people are inherently trying to do without realizing it is they're trying to bridge that gap between the ninth and the fifth wave. So there is that connection and understanding of this diamond consciousness, this diamond that it's at the source of all things, which we saw in the first session. And it's our job to actually bridge that, and we bridge it through connections with the ancestors, these ancestors, which live in the holographic imprints from the fifth wave. So the fifth wave also had no ego associated with it, because there was no intensely developed rational mind. That actually comes in with the sixth wave. So we're looking unfiltered, no ego, a harmonic relationship with nature, this understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, which we see as a theme running throughout all of the cultures of that time. It was the time of the origin of Adam and Eve, or various versions of. Some of the information that I've picked up is that there were various Adams and various Eves. And of course, it was the emergence of the modern thinking human and their ability to access the tree of life, the tree of good and the tree of evil, which is the ultimate polarized tree at the center of the universe that gives rise to that structural form of the diamond. So can you start seeing some of these connections running through these waves, which is really fascinating with these aspects of mind? So it's just creating those links. So that's where the Adam and Eve mythology actually started and came from, is the fifth wave. So that started or landed and would have been effective from about 150,000 years ago. The archaeological records indicate the appearance of modern man as we know him today in terms of structure and form, skull shape, etc., between 200,000 and 100,000 years ago. So there is this correlation in the fossil records. So the fifth wave was also the time of Atlantis and Lemuria. So how, if the fifth wave was actually unfiltered, thinking about the sort of that unfiltered capacity that individuals have, we can kind of see our understanding of the Lemurian cultures, which were very gentle, very harmonious, very interconnected, very reverent and respect of the goddess or the feminine energy, represented in the fifth wave. But what about Atlantis? Because Atlantis and the priesthoods and the technologies that we connect with, connecting back to Atlantis, don't seem to fit the fifth wave paradigm or mean. So they were utilizing crystal technology. They were utilizing technology that was beyond the capacity of the fifth wave to perhaps rationalize and comprehend. So this is where things start getting a little bit interesting. So we have the indigenous cultures, no ego, Adam and Eve's forming, etc. I'm going to get into that and take it forward in a minute. I loved this picture because it brings us back to that concept of the tree at the center of the universe. And this is a poster that somebody drew. And this is a quote from Michael Tazarian, which is, in ancient mythology and history, the symbols of the tree and the serpent have always denoted women and the feminine principle and the mysteries in their keeping. So this is real fifth wave connectivity stuff. It was viewed as the ultimate feminine that gave birth to the universe. The octahedron and the shape that it then took is the masculine introduction and the polarization, the implementation of the masculine form. But trees and serpents have always been associated with the feminine form. And then I found this poster and I went, oh my goodness, this is just absolutely brilliant. We've got a woman who's actually the trunk of the tree, you know, sort of giving birth to everything. And the serpent wrapped around her. We've got the tree and the serpent embodied in one image. I thought, what a perfect manifestation of those original memes and understandings and connection. So the tree is the tree of life, the origin or gateway to the great mystery, and the serpent represents the waves or emanations from that tree. So the serpent and the tree are inextricably linked. So that's why I just love this poster. We've got the serpent wrapped around the tree in female form. So are you guys still all right with this? You still with me? I haven't fried your brains yet? Not yet. Katie says no. Good. Right, just have a look at this, because I said the fifth wave was where we see the emergence of the mythology around Adam and Eve, in fact, various Adams and Eves. And we see and find through some research, and this is based on some of the research that Michael Tazarian did, that the Hebrew word for Eve is Hava, meaning mother of all things, as well as serpent. So we actually link back to the Miman mythology. Arabic words for snake, life, and teaching are closely related to the word or the name Eve. So there are various permutations of the word that describes snake, life, and teaching, all linking to the word or the name Eve in Arabic. So again, different cultures, same concept, that we get our teachings from connection to the tree of life. And the gateway to that tree is through the feminine and the female form, or the right brain. More about that in a moment. The concept of the Great Mother, the creative feminine principle, informed the cultures arising or emanating from the fifth wave holograms of mind that were downloaded. So we do see these mother, great goddess principles originating within the fifth wave cultures. And we see also, sort of taking it slightly forward, that the goddess-based sects, we know from places like, oh man, what's that island? Malta, where we see one of, some of the most ancient remains of the goddess sects, that these were prevalent around the Mediterranean. Not only 1500 BC, but earlier than that, because the sixth wave, or the following wave, only kicked off about 3000 BC. So the goddess sects were actually carried forward from the fifth wave into the sixth wave paradigm. So they've been evidenced around 1500 BC and earlier. They were carried from the fifth wave. By 500 AD, fast forward 2,000 years, they had all but disappeared and been overrun by the patriarchy and the patriarchal energy, the left brain energy, which is the sixth wave. And that's when they disappeared. But they had to disappear because it was the bringing forward of the left brain and the rational mind. Okay, so it was the overrunning that has to happen in respect of beginning to develop strength and reasoning and ability to think differently. But it's just saying that in respect of the timing of these waves, we see evidence in the archaeological remnants. Okay, so we've got, yep, I love these connections. Yeah, Atlantis at the end of the fifth wave. Yes. So I want to get to that now, because that, the whole emergence of Atlantis is relevant to the experience of trauma and the fragmentation of the human psyche, which is what we are still dealing with now and we are repairing. So there were many, many things that happened towards and it's not the end of the fifth wave, because the fifth wave is still running through us, but towards the end of that location in time, sort of, was it sort of not even three, it's like between 40 and 50,000 years ago. From 50,000 years ago, there were a lot of things that happened that really started impacting on the human psyche, which influenced the way in which the left brain developed with the incoming sixth wave. So I just want to show you that, because this is now about the origin of trauma and the birthing of ego, and this started happening towards the end of the fifth wave. Yes. The first thing is Atlantis, which was about intervention, and it has been noted that in our DNA that there are aberrations genetically and things that cannot be accounted for in respect of, it's with the emergence of certain blood groups. They can't trace those blood groups back. There's all sorts of things in the DNA which would point towards the only logical conclusion that there was intervention. We do also know that there were advanced civilizations. The evidence is widespread. It is clear that there were advanced civilizations across the planet. They were not the equivalent of our modern humans. There was an intervention by an advanced race of people. And this is this whole thing about understanding that evolution takes place on a universal level. So at the time that we were developing in accordance with the fifth wave, there would have been civilizations and elements on other planets that would have been downloaded with the sixth wave information and had the opportunity to develop hugely advanced technologies. They brought that to Earth, and that influenced then the way in which events actually played out or transpired. So what we find is Atlantis was an intervention. Its ET six wavers interfered with the natural progress of our evolution through genetic manipulation, because their whole purpose was the creation of a slave race. We find this encoded in mythologies also throughout Africa, throughout the Middle East, throughout Greek philosophical records, wherever there are sort of decodings of ancient documents. It's apparently even encoded within the biblical references, you know, so subsequent to that. But again, it's stories that have been passed down. But the ancient peoples, the indigenous peoples, all talk about ET races, star beings, and people from the stars. So we know that there was an intervention by star beings. There was a presence on the planet that was not entirely and solely human. So the Atlanteans, their whole purpose was the creation of a slave race, because if they were early six wavers, they were purely fixated on left brain consciousness, which was about control and management and power and masculine patriarchal characteristics, technology, machines, etc., etc. And they wanted the indigenous peoples of Earth to actually work for them. So their whole idea was to bring them into line, to be able to create a race of beings that had the strength and the capacity to act and obey what was instructions on behalf of rulership, rulers, self-imposed rulers and masters. So that's where a lot of the Atlantean technology came from. So they came in with that ego that they then wished to impose upon the natural human beings of the planet. Now, those early humans, having no filters, to a large extent many of them became manipulated by this imposition of the left brain. So this is the first incidence of trauma experienced by those peoples as a consequence of, is this where the reptilians came in? Yes. Yeah. This will be where the reptilians actually came in, that reptilian mind, the reptilian brain. So it came from off planet and was infiltrated. Our planet was infiltrated by it. So the indigenous peoples experienced a great deal of trauma as a consequence of this. You take them living this beautiful, harmonious lifestyle, you bring them into an environment where they now have to work for somebody else, under somebody else's rulership, under somebody else's instruction, and that begins to create trauma. You take anybody and you try and indoctrinate them through re-education methods, which is trying to change their existing paradigms, and you create trauma in the brain and trauma to the person. So you get aspects of the psyche that split off. So they were trying to recondition and genetically manipulate humanity. So we've got another comment. Let's just have a look here. It does make you realize how everything is somehow organized. Yes? Yeah. And it's also very interesting because it's what happened on our planet. We now have an opportunity to begin to correct that. If we understand where the human ego came from, the ego is birthed as a means of protecting us. What do we learn about the ego? The ego in the personality emerges to protect us by establishing patterns of behavior to protect the inner self and the inner core. So this was the first opportunity for the ego and the left brain and that protective control mechanism to emerge, because control was taken away from these individuals and taken over by another group. So the only way that they could get control back was to sort of create it with their personality. Let's have a look at the chat. Understanding equals love. Yes, that's it. To understand is to be liberated from it, because we can love it all back into wholeness. Trauma equals fears, and reptilians feed on fears and other emotions alike. Absolutely. Trauma arises as a consequence of fear. And it was fear that was fed in so many ways during the fifth wave. So there's so much coming to the surface now on healing trauma. Yes, both from this time and intergenerational, and to actually change the brain functioning to shift to whole brain functioning again, which could be compassion and love rather than fear. Absolutely. So it is really interesting how we find these links now between PTSD and addictions. PTSD, as in trauma and some of the depression, trauma and depression, trauma and all of those adverse emotional characteristics which have prevented us from truly connecting with our inner love. And yes, we are seeing modalities emerging, which is just really beautiful, which help us to deal with trauma. So anything that we can do which can support others in alleviating trauma supports them on that journey of becoming whole-brained. It supports their awakening journey without them even realizing that it's part of awakening. That's part of our contribution to their wholeness. So yes, beautiful that we were seeing it. Rachel says, when we were down the copper mine yesterday, you could see how the fear of not having food or shelter made the workers easier to be controlled. Absolutely. And what do we see in our current society? Now, this I found really interesting as well, because this next bit also comes from Michael Tazarian's work. So it fits in beautifully with the waves as well, is that we tend to think of Lemuria as being the precursor to Atlantis. I don't know about you guys. Does anybody else have a different understanding or another understanding of Lemuria and Lemurian culture? No? Okay. So in essence, from some of the history that is being collated through the stories that are told by the indigenous peoples, Lemuria, or known as Mu, and I love this, it's known as the place of the ancestors. Isn't that just brilliant? So the indigenous peoples that all refer to Lemuria refer to it as the place of the ancestors. So it's fifth wave Lemurian energy. They were a breakaway group from the Atlantean control systems that saw what was happening, had the wherewithal to want to protect the harmony that they had grown up with and established, and they broke away from Atlantis and established their own cultural enclaves. And they invited more of the slaves to actually come back with them. This really infuriated the Atlantean beings, and they then did whatever they could. So what they wanted to do was genetically, this is where the genetic manipulation came in, they wanted to then genetically manipulate the individuals that they had as slaves so that they would be more controllable. And that is where much of the modern human DNA and species actually comes in, is from that genetically tweaked, controllable human beings. So they were the Lemurian individuals that broke away from Atlantis, were the founding ancestors of the modern indigenous peoples that we are familiar with. And they managed to hold their essence. However, it also did lead. So we've got here, sorry, I just want to read this comment. Most people believe that Atlantis is a place. What is my understanding? My understanding is that Atlantis was a culture. I said Atlantis was spread throughout the world, that it was not just one continent, because when Atlantis was destroyed, so were a lot of the Lemurian civilizations and the Lemurian islands. The people of Hawaii actually claim that what's left of Hawaii is part of the original continent that housed a lot of the Lemurian culture. However, if we understand that it's the place of the ancestors, then Lemuria as a cultural spread would have also appeared and been prevalent in various places around the world. So to me, they were cultures and not places. So they were massive wars and cataclysms that further fractured the human psyche and made human beings, and as a general rule, more controllable. It was only those that existed in isolated groups that were not further fractured by the cataclysms and events that then took place beyond this and further than this. So there was another comment here. Sorry. More, let's just see what's in the chat room. So Lemuria was a split from Atlantis. Yes, yes, yes. It was the group that had the wherewithal to actually pull themselves out of that situation because they could see what was happening. So we've got, thank you. There are always people claiming to discover Atlantis. My understanding is that it was a time frame rather than a society. This would make sense why we are wired for survival and the stress response. Yes, thank you. That's absolutely part and parcel. Thank you for comments. That's perfect. I just love it because you guys have got it. You get it. And that's, yes, many people claiming to discover Atlantis, that they say, well, Atlantis is Bimini. There's the Bimini Road. Atlantis is off the coast of Japan. Atlantis is the Bermuda Triangle. Atlantis is here. It's various places where we see that advanced technology because it was a culture within a particular time frame. So we had, as a consequence of all of this that was going on, we had people breaking away from their manipulation. There were wars that were instituted by the Atlanteans and the Dark Priesthood. There was a lot of understanding of how to use the forces of nature. So there was black magic and dark magic used at that particular time as well. There was technology that was used and misused. So very, very much when people talk about recreating Atlantis, I kind of go, I don't know, I don't think that's a very good thing. And what we see now with the rebirthing of technology in such a massive way is there's a lot of misuse, because that ancient bloodline has actually been carried through into modern day. They still exist, and it still exists because it's here in the waves. Okay, so the imprints still exist. We had subsequent wars, which were earthly and galactic. If we look at the electric universe theory and their insight and information, and as well as cave drawings and links back to some of the imagery that's found in the caves, that could only indicate massive activity of plasma in the atmosphere, whether from weapons. You read the Mahabharata, one of the most ancient Indian texts. They talk about cosmic wars with descriptions that sound like nuclear warfare. You know, so there was the development of all sorts of weaponry that took place. So the stress and the trauma that was part of this closing period of the fifth wave was enormous. And then from 40,000 years also, we find massive swathes of populations actually being wiped out as a consequence of natural cataclysms. 40,000 years ago, and we see also that it was natural in respect of the confluence and the closeness of those heavenly manifestations and what we're finding on Earth. There was a significant surge 40,000 years ago in cosmic radiation as measured by, it's an isotope, beryllium-10 in the Greenland ice cores. They've measured it, so they know that 40,000 years ago, something happened that spiked the amount of beryllium, which is only found in space. It's not normally found in the Earth, but they found it in the ice cores. There was a 10% drop in magnetic field strength. There was also an evolutionary event or a shift in consciousness as observed in cave paintings around the world. So this is where people were actually drawing some of the things that they were seeing in the sky, and some of the more advanced cave paintings were beginning to emerge. And 40,000 years ago was part of a day, an upwards part, or a day cycle, if you like, of the fifth wave. So the fifth wave cycle had almost 8,000 years, 8,000 years up, 8,000 years down. So 40,000 years ago is 5 cycles ago. This would have been an evolutionary shift, part of the day aspect of that wave cycle. So very, very interesting, evolutionary. 26,000 years ago, we actually see the disappearance of Neanderthal man. So there was Neanderthals that had been present on the Earth. We also saw the beginning of an ice age. And again, there is evidence that there was cosmic effect through beryllium-10 presence, isotope presence in the ice cores. So they know, and this is a precessionary cycle. So we know that there's been a link also with the evolutionary leaps and precessionary cycles, but this all falls within the fifth wave influence. And then between 13 and 11,000 years ago, we had a major extinction. We had a rapid warming of the Earth, exceptionally rapid. What are we seeing now? The end of the last ice age, we had the floods. All of the flood stories speak about this time of around 10,000 years ago that wiped out cultures. They did wipe out civilizations. All of this within the last 10,000 years. And that, in cosmic terms, is pretty recent. So again, flood stories, disappearance of Atlantis and Lemurian cultures, aside from isolated pockets around the world. There was a cosmic event, again, indicated by beryllium-10 and iridium deposits. Huge swathes of nanodiamonds found in the black mats in certain parts of North America and in Greenland, in deposits around the world at the same time. massive delivery of cosmic information for life upgrade in preparation for the sixth wave, emergence as well of agricultural, domesticated animals and crops. So in this sort of like a switchover period, you actually see 10,000 years ago, something quite fascinating happen in that domesticated animals, domesticated crops, none of that had existed prior to this. And suddenly crops have genetic capabilities and show a genetic variation that didn't exist previously. So we see this massive turnaround. It's quite possible that there was genetic manipulation of the wildlife that existed as well, that this was part of the Atlantean interference that supported the emergence of these domesticated animals and crops. So let me see, we've got some comments here. Would you say the waves are a parallel and have something to do with what we call now the different dimensions or life plans and teach all round? They're not really parallel because they're moving with different frequencies. So it's almost like they are interpenetrating spirals, if that makes sense. So yeah, I kind of look at this as being part and parcel of the spirals of time, all of this. But they are all running. So I don't know if I'd call it different dimensions because it's still something that has been locked into the reality and understanding of the dimension within which we are embedded. So my understanding of dimensions is actually broader, perhaps, than just these waves. It almost expands beyond those waves. So I hope that makes sense, Serge. Rachel says, it's always worth remembering that a lot of information is being erased from record. This is true. So we rely so much on science, which has been controlled for so long, for what we perceive as truth. Absolutely. Very, very good point. Rachel, thank you. And it's also our ability to now tap into. Now, my understanding of this is that we are gaining more access to what has been embedded in these waves because the ninth wave also no longer has filters. So this started with the eighth wave and this opening up of our right brain into those realms and our ability to connect with that. So in the last 20 years, we've started having people connect. And of course, that lends itself to a great deal of imagination and a lot of stories. So, but people like Michael Tazarian has done an incredible amount of research. People like Randall Carlson has done an amazing amount of research into geology and the geological formations and questioning the mainstream scientific view on certain things. So there are people who are also researching in alignment with that, who are alternative thinkers, but critical thinkers. So to me, it's sort of this removal of the filters, which is enabling us to reconnect with this truth, along with these alternate thinkers that are giving us a framework for this that actually sits on top, like Carl Kalleman with the 9 waves. So I'm going, yeah, this kind of like really sits beautifully in respect of understanding our history in a different way. So what puts the ego into the driving seat is trauma, because the ego and the need to create a measure of control in the face of incredible danger. Modern man still suffers from PTSD as a result of these ancient events. And the left brain ego has been running the show ever since. So ever since the 6th wave, the left brain has been running the show and the ego has been running the show. It's often referred to as the fracturing of the human psyche. So if we can understand that this fracturing happened through, I mean, we cannot even comprehend. We get traumatized by a little flood, you know, that sweeps through one town. You know, and people are devastated, lives are lost, or an earthquake, or a tsunami. Now, I want you to just almost close your eyes for a moment and just amplify one of those events 50, 100, 1,000 times in magnitude. And imagine what that would do in respect of traumatizing the individuals. There's like no safety. There's nowhere to go. It's like, what do we do? Absolutely helpless in the face of these massive, massive events that they have no control over. So the ego wants to create and protect as much as possible. So we can see why that would have emerged. So we got another comment. This program is perfect for helping us to remember, yes, the data that we have within us ready to share as we access these frequencies. It'll be like a collective trauma, yes. And that is understanding, and I think to me that's one of the things that's really, really important, is to understand what is impacting the human psyche at the moment, why people are behaving as they do, why they become so enamored with video games, with sort of technology, with whatever. It's because there's a need to turn away from, as these filters come down with the ninth wave, it's like the ego and the personality that has been serving to protect them for so long, because these people haven't developed other ways of dealing with it like we have, sort of waking up and going through this process. It's like shut down and allow their attention to be diverted. It's like, I just can't go there because it's too much. There's a primal fear and a primal remembering that starts arising in their body that is just squashed down. Immediately it starts to arise by all of these distractions. And it's for us to be able to love that even while we are working to heal this collective trauma, because it's huge and it's still playing out. Okay. So yes, we know that love is the final answer. It's just, what does that really mean? How big is that? How big does our love need to be in order to bring that healing to the collective wounds and what we carry? And that's huge. So here we come back to the spirals. Sorry, I just want to have a look in the chat room. So we've got, who or what programmed the 9 waves originally? Unconditional. My belief, Michelle, is that we programmed the waves because we are manifestations of source. I suspect it comes from what I heard about being the ancestors from the future. That's a point. Are you saying that the waves are responsible, that everything happens, for everything that happens on Earth? Does ET interference still play a role? Did we create the inverted matrix? Oh yes, we played a role in creating the inverted matrix. For sure we did. Never mind people going, I would never do that. You're kind of going, okay, no, we need to just open up the scope a little bit. No, the waves themselves are not responsible. The waves are only information. We are the programmers that take on board the information and the holograms that the waves deliver. So what gives birth to the waves is source. We are fragments of source, then utilizing and programming reality based on the downloads of the waves. So again, we get this dual feedback system. So yes, we've played all sides of the coin, and we have actually had a role to play in creating, if you want to call it, the inverted matrix, and ET interference does play a role. Does that make sense, guys? We have to remember that who we think we are in this body is not who we are, and utilize this information with unconditional love. Yeah, but we're talking a really powerful love. Yeah, so it is how we act on the information. Absolutely, yes. It's how what we do with this information supports the programming of the matrix and the reality. And it brings me back, so some of you will have heard me say this before, it brings me back to one of the descriptions that I was given years ago with in respect of the diamond, and I'm talking about, it was about 10 years ago, when I was going, higher self, give me like a fundamental understanding, like a two-liner, so that I can actually give people some insight into the diamond and what it does in a simple way. And what I was shown and told was the diamond is breaking down the matrix, breaking down the firewalls, breaking down the firewalls. And it's like, as a consequence of this matrix that was created at the end and into the sixth wave, end of the fifth into the sixth wave, and as a consequence of the trauma, we became entrapped within this false matrix. We lost our connection to source. And that was part of the plan. However, what the diamond does, and reconnecting with that diamond consciousness, which is the unfiltered consciousness of the fifth and the ninth waves, by doing that and by reorientating our energy fields, it begins to break down the firewalls that have been in place protecting that matrix through those previous waves. And I went, that's a really good explanation there. I can see that, and I can do that. So the clarity of the diamond, the piercing light of the diamond, supports us in breaking down the firewalls and being able to reprogram, because we can access the information and the operating systems. Make sense? Yeah? So, we got here, what are your thoughts on the belief that we should have already evolved and were held back? Do you know what? I am of the belief, and that is just then a belief, so it becomes my opinion. I understand that everything happens in perfect and divine timing. So I don't think that, bearing in mind the timing of the ninth wave, which is the unity wave, which is the wave that's actually fueling our expanded perspectives and evolution, if that only arrived in 2011, which is only 10 years ago, it's going to take ages for that evolution to happen within our physical form. We are always evolving. So I don't think we were held back. I think we were actually entrapped within this matrix, but that was a part and parcel of the process that we needed to go through. It's how we learned about power and how not to use power. You know, power is not about controlling other people, but unless we've actually been through that and given away our power by being caught up in the matrix, then we wouldn't realize who we are and how to use it responsibly. So Rachel says, yeah, this is probably the victim mentality being released and seen. I agree, yes. So I don't think there's any, we should have evolved already. I think the timing is absolutely perfect. So much actually depends on those perspectives. Thanks for all of these lovely comments, people. It's really great for helping us to understand and integrate the insights. I'm just keeping my eye on the time and realize we're getting up to the exercises. Can't believe where this 2 hours have gone, and I'm glad I took out those extra bits of info, because it just would have been too much. So if you can imagine now, so this is where the unfiltered fifth wave, this was where where consciousness actually started emerging, where connection to the diamond consciousness actually started, and where it also started being corrupted, and that corruption has been brought through. So what we are doing now is we are restoring that spiral back down through and to the fifth wave. We are healing the traumas of the fifth and subsequent waves. This is a critical aspect of our evolutionary journey and ability to attune to and embody the ninth wave. So that is why, you know, when we look at the question as well, is that we stand in the now moment, and the now moment is where we make our choices and decisions, but we need to have cognizance of that continuum on either side in order for that to flow smoothly through us, so that we can bring together all of that fragmentation of the past into the point of unity now and unification now, so that we carry that unification forward. Make sense? So when we look at spirals, now we're going to work with the spirals in a slightly different way, because you can actually see that if we spiral from here, which is where we're at, and we spiral back through time, we're going to connect with the 8th wave, 7th wave, 6th wave, all of that information back to the 5th wave. We can take that spiral down to source, to its very origin in matter through the atoms in our bodies. And it's Nassim Haramein that actually says at the heart of every atom is a black hole that connects you with source. So you can actually see this happening through the 9th waves, and that makes perfect sense to me. So you go back to source, you actually harness the purification and the assistance of that higher wisdom and understanding, and then you spiral it back up and bring it to that point of unification and unity at the 9th wave. And what do you get if you overlap counter-rotating cones or spirals? You get, look in the middle here. I mean, it's not the best image because it's a very elongated shape, but you actually get the projection or the creation of a diamond through these counter-rotating spirals. So we're spiraling back down from where we're at now to source, collecting and looking at all of those holograms, and we bring it all back. And it's the light, the pure light of diamond consciousness, which actually emerges as a consequence of that purification. Because you can imagine now, if you're spiraling back, you find a patterning associated with the 8th wave and the polarization somewhere in your timelines, whether it's yours or, you know, sort of going further back, and you get a disruption in the spiral. So what that does is it creates an imbalance or an instability in the spiral. You start going back here, back to the 7th wave, 6th wave, back thousands of years, and there's lots and lots of stuff that our ancestors imprinted into the spirals of time through their experiences, 5th, 6th, 7th waves, etc., which has created and quite possibly caused a lot of instability in the spiral. So as we spiral back in time, we pick up those fractures, we begin to mend them, and then we bring it back. You guys with me? You okay with that? Make sense? There was something in the chat room. I'm just trying to get the chat room up again. I can't see it now. There we go. Chat room. So I just thought of the holodyne process. Yes. Where the solution, ascension, evolution already exists, and we're now understanding it from the problem aspect. Yes. So the solution itself created the problem, because the solution already existed in the 9th wave, which had not been made manifest yet. The solutions are there, and our higher self actually has the answer to those solutions. And it's for everything that's made manifest physically, there is its opposite that is unmanifest, and that is an ancient truth that the initiates were actually taught through all of the mystery schools. So if you have one thing made manifest, you have its opposite unmanifest. So if we have manifest a problem, it means that its solution is unmanifest. So through the holodyne work, you actually can switch those around. So it means that it's already there. And then reconnect our DNA with 12 original branches. Okay. I must say this, Serge, I am not of the school of 12 DNA branches. I do not adhere to that. I think that number 12 has come in because of a misunderstanding. We do not have 12 strands of DNA. The molecular structure of DNA is geometrically such that the molecules within the strand form dodecahedral shapes, and the dodecahedron is a geometry, a sacred geometry that has 12 sides to it. So that number 12 is built in to the geometry of the DNA. However, we have 2 strands, so it's within the strands that you get these 12 functioning geometries within the two strands themselves, and we are purifying and putting back into place the original blueprints of that ultimate and original sacred geometry. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I can maybe explain it to you in a subsequent session, but it's probably a little bit too much for the brain at the moment. But I do not adhere to the 12-strand DNA because our two-stranded DNA can do everything. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you. And yeah, that's where I look at a lot of the stuff that goes on out there and I go, okay, yeah, it doesn't sit with me. And then I'll find the information that actually supports that. Go back to the blueprints of the galaxies, as that the galaxies themselves form a two-strand DNA form, which is part of a universal template. So the two strands are the universal template. And our DNA is so mobile that we can move those molecules around and get our genes to express something else through communication. And that's part of the information that's being downloaded now with the 9th wave. Okay. So here we go. Practices for week 2. It's been challenging to understand something that isn't inner knowing. Yes, thank you. Yeah, Rachel, that's a really good way of describing it, because it is sort of expanding that inner knowing. It's like, I know this. It's expanding it into an understanding so that those aha moments really pop in all directions. And that's really been the gift and the beauty of the diamond. So that's why it was so lovely, you know, hearing Katie say what you did earlier in respect of those aha moments and lights coming on and what have you, and hearing other people say that, yes, it helps them to make sense, and suddenly there's that understanding of what they have always known. So it's just shedding new light and expanding that, and that's the beauty and the gift. So we're going to do a little bit of focused work with the spirals. So just having seen that last picture, you can imagine now an anti-clockwise spiral back through time, through those waves to source, and then clockwise spiral to recode life with source light, because that then informs and infuses all of the waves. So it's kind of going back on that spiral to find out what holograms present themselves. So for those of you that have done the holodyne process, you can then use the holodyne process to bring balance back to that using the holodynes. I don't think all of you have done that. It is an additional process outside of this. So I was going to take you on just a simple process that you can use for this. And to also focus and balance the brain by working with the 12 complementary attributes. Now, this is something that's taken from ancient mystery schools. So I'm just going to run you through this one, and then we'll do a quick bit of spiral work just to finish it. So the 12 complementary attributes are things that all initiates of mastery were taught in the ancient mystery schools. So this is also transitioning from the 5th into the 6th waves. Okay, so we have a carryover of the 5th wave with some really powerful understanding. Oh, sorry, this is also now just a little bit about spirals, talking about counter-rotating spirals and the human script versus divine script. Some of you will recognize this because I've spoken about it in a previous webinar. The human script runs left to right. So the human script is the counterclockwise spiral. So think about this, that's why I said, when you're running the spirals back through time, you're going to run a counterclockwise spiral from your heart back through all of the waves, because you are then accessing everything that is being encoded into those spirals from the human script. And when you reach source, you then clockwise spiral back through the same journey to bring source light back. So you build life. It's almost like the counterclockwise unravels. Can you feel that? Counterclockwise unravels and opens up, and clockwise builds. It's like winding it back in. So just maybe close your eyes for a moment and just imagine that. So just close your eyes and take a deep breath and focus your energy on your heart. And you can place yourself into your diamond, drawing the energy up, allowing it to accumulate in your heart to a point of light, pure, beautiful, pristine source light that's kept alive in your heart. And now begin by placing your focus on that light to expand and begin to spiral that light in an anti-clockwise direction. And you're going to move it out through the back. And you're going to continue that anti-clockwise spiraling motion out through your diamond. And very slowly, it forms a cone, a conical shape that begins to spiral into your history and your ancestry, out into the collective. And as it does, I want you to notice on that spiral where there are little nodules, little balls or holograms, pictures, storage units. You're going to set the intention of anything that has impacted on your manifestation in human form. Anything from your ancestors going all the way back. You might just in this moment in time pause to look. Just feel it unwinding, traveling all the way back to the total expansiveness of the brilliant light, the diamond light, the sun, the amazing light of Source itself. And at the center of this all-encompassing light is a brilliant, brilliant point. Condensation, all of that light can be condensed into one small point that begins to trace clockwise spiral back through time to connect with you in this moment. And this clockwise spiral brings with it the eternal light, the answers, the purity, the insight from Source of the solutions and the healing for all of those holograms trapped within the anti-clockwise spiral. Let it shine its light. Just notice what happens to some of that patterning as you spiral the light back in. Till it gets to the point where you and your diamond are enclosed within a diamond of brilliant, brilliant, beautiful light that you can condense back down into that point within your heart, that point of perfection, that guiding light that shines the way forward. Just take note of how you feel, what emotions may be evident, prominent. And open your eyes. Okay, so that's a quick question, just a very brief experience. How did you guys connect with that? Did you pick up any emotions? Did you see any images on that spiral? Did you feel the difference between the anti-clockwise versus the clockwise spiral? How did that feel? Anything at the moment? No? No, sweetie. So Rachel says, I saw a bright light beaming through the leaves of the tree of life. The clockwise spiral was much stronger and more forceful. Aha, yes, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. Very, very intense. So it's the clockwise spiral that builds and the anti-clockwise spiral that begins to break down. And, you know, one of those things that was like observing what they do at Stonehenge when I went to Stonehenge as a sacred place. I was very disappointed because I couldn't feel the energy, you know, that everybody was raving about. And I'm going, I don't get it. You know, I'm really not getting it. And then discovered that what they've done is they've orientated the pathways at Stonehenge so that you walk anti-clockwise around the monument instead of clockwise. So what it is actually humanizing, grounding, and locking that energy into the inverted matrix. It feels completely different in the core. Somehow the core has actually held the energy. But outside the monument, you walk anti-clockwise, and you can literally, it's like you feel nothing. You can't feel the sacredness of the divine when you're walking anti-clockwise around it. Whereas if you change it and you start walking clockwise, you will begin to build. But each one of those spirals has a purpose, because it is only through the balancing of both that we initiate and connect with the diamond light that unites all of the paradoxes. Yeah? So it serves a purpose. There was sorry, I just couldn't get I'll get the thingy up here. Okay, so these are the 12 opposites. Now this is something really interesting, and this is going to give you something to work on. So Elizabeth said, oh, about the spirals. This is wonderful. Rachel said, felt this strongly in my heart as it returned. Elizabeth felt a lot of energy releasing, and I got really in deep. But that's brilliant, because that was just such a short process. Rachel said, same, yes, they do. I also felt the importance of my life and my connection to source ancestors. Fantastic, fantastic. If you get that, you know, I mean, these are attributes of mastery and that absolute knowingness. It's so, so important. Thank you for those comments. Really, really beautiful. Now, taking a look at this, I'm just going to go through it with you quickly. I want to ask you guys also very quickly, if I give you this as an exercise, are you guys happy enough, because Paula suggested this too, and someone else suggested it, is that we stretch these sessions out to do them every 2 weeks so that you have time in between to work with the material to integrate it. Are you guys happy with that? Katie's nodding, yeah. What about the rest of you? Because I know it's a lot of work. Who's that?
Can we unmute? I'm just saying yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Barney. Yeah, I've got yes. We've got fine by me. Oh, everyone's saying I agree. Yes, that's brilliant, because it gives you time to work with these. Thank you, everybody. Gives you time to work with these processes. And integrate the understandings that come from them. So that's fantastic, because this next one is also quite a lengthy one. And I looked at this and I thought, oh shit, that's quite a bit for you to do in the space of 1 week. And this, in fact, is something that can continue throughout the rest of the program, so it's really just initiating. Right, so understanding that there are 12 fundamental sets of opposites that we can learn. As we learn to master these sets of opposites, we learn to balance and hold paradoxes and polarities. There are no rights and wrongs in this. It's not about that. There is only divine and appropriate or inappropriate application of these qualities, because every single one of these qualities is appropriate given the right set of circumstances. And our mastery is to be able to access the right approach, the right frequency of that particular attribute under any circumstances at all. And this is interesting because if you just read through it, so I want you to close your eyes just for a moment. I'm going to read through the list of attributes, and I want you to note what is triggered in your body. If there are any specific words that trigger for you. So, being silent, speaking, receptivity and receiving, resistance to influence, obeying and ruling, humility and self-confidence, speed and responding rapidly, reflection, to accept everything, to differentiate and discern, ability to fight, peace, caution, courage, to possess nothing, to command everything, to have no ties, loyalty, scorning death, regard for life, indifference, and love. So, were there any of those words that had specific triggers for you, that you found a particular trigger with, or your body responded to, or you thought, oh, I don't really like that one, or I like that one? Yeah? I'll unmute you, Katie. Oh, hang on, you're not unmuting for whatever reason. Maybe you need to do it from your side, Katie, if you can do that. Whoops.
Hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. To accept everything, I definitely think to differentiate, well, at least to discern.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm working on, and I think is important.
Yeah.
We need to feel, to experience what really is energetically us.
Yeah.
Through frequency, through understanding, through just really feeling that is how we feel.
Yeah, okay. So those were ones that stood out for you?
That one particularly.
Okay, great. In a positive way, so that you were connecting, you just had an awareness that it's something that you are really working on at the moment?
Oh yeah, I know that. Yes.
Okay. All right, thanks. Thanks, Katie. Oh, someone's got a slip off. Okay, that's great. I felt quite powerful when you said command everything. Okay, good. triggered by 3 and 9. There we go. That's an interesting one. Okay. So you will find, thank you, everyone, that there are triggers. So whoever has to leave, I accept some as true for me and others for not being resonating with. You're not in resonance with. However, okay, so that's interesting because we want to bring our awareness into all 12 of those attributes and to be able to embody and understand and master all 12 of them, because every single one of them is appropriate given specific sets of circumstances. So it's a very, very powerful and very insightful exercise. I've got a Word document for you, so I'll just take you through some of the stuff with this one. Okay, mastering these is necessary for ultimate unification and co-creating effectively with the ninth wave, because that is what we are doing. We're reprogramming with the ninth wave. So let me just introduce you to this concept of the pyramids, 12 sets of opposites, the sequence of the pyramids, because we're talking about the 12. I'm just going to do a little deviation here. Here's a pyramid, picture of a three-dimensional picture of a pyramid, which is equal to the 12-pointed star. And a 12-pointed star is actually a fabulous teaching tool, but they are one and the same thing. Can you guys see that at all? You kind of go, how is a pyramid the same as a 12-pointed star? No. I actually, this when I first saw this, I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So let me show you. So this is why I say it's ancient mystery schools, and these are attributes that were taught around the world. And think about pyramids that we see all over the world in every culture. These pyramids were prevalent. So these are part of the teachings. That at the base of the pyramid here, you've got a square. Somebody's just put a comment in the chat room. Karen says they're all pyramids. Okay, no, that's a good one, but that's not the right answer. Thank you for that, though. That's wonderful. Yeah. So here you've got your square, which is at the base of the pyramid. And I want you to look here. Inside the 12-pointed star, you've got the square. Okay? So there's your base. If you unpack this pyramid, you have a square and you have 4 triangles. So you unpack it, and then you overlay the triangles over the square. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. Sorry, that goes there. There's 4. So you've got 4 triangles overlaying this, creating a 12-pointed star. So the hidden meaning in the 12-pointed star is that it is a 2-dimensional representation of the pyramid. Okay? You with me? So here we start playing with geometry, and it becomes really interesting. So we've got a 12-pointed star. Now we're talking 12 pairs of opposites. Okay, in this little exercise. So all of those qualities you can actually label at one point of the 12-pointed star. So we've got 12 sets of opposites, which means we've got 2 12-pointed stars, because here you've got one lot of attributes, and here you've got the opposite set of attributes. So if that equals pyramid, by working and balancing the 12 sets of opposites, what do? You strengthen and you actually create your diamond. You see what I did there? Yes. It's not me. This is ancient mystery school teachings, actually. So that's why when I saw it, I went, oh my God, I love this. This is just brilliant. Okay. Yes, you can see flat diamonds in this 12-pointed star image as well. So I just wanted to show you that, because in future work, we will actually work with the 12-pointed star. But it just gives you a little bit of insight into when you work with these 12 attributes, you are creating a tension. You are creating a balanced point that runs throughout your diamond. So you are strengthening this, and that core column in your diamond runs through the center of your brain. So you are creating a holding point which enables the neuronal patterns to form by being able to balance and work with the awareness of these attributes. So you are strengthening your diamond, your alignment, and your brain. This is Rachel. When you look sideways, you can see 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Okay, yeah, that's wonderful. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't see that. Thanks. Yeah, you've got a face created out of the slot. Okay, so 12 sets of attributes. We will continue with that. I'm going to send you a document. Just bear with me for a minute because I've actually got the document on my screen, and I can pull it up so that you can see it. Right. I'm going to send this to you. So this supports the rewiring of your brain. There are 12 sets of qualities or characteristics that are inherent polarities within our psyche. You'll see where this is going. Each is a complementary energetic manifestation of the same force. So you have a continuum, and you've got these on either side. When we learn to control them and work with them effectively, this leads us into the unification, the divine unity of the ninth wave. There is an innate tension that exists between the opposites that, when mastered, create a crossover in the brain and a strengthening of the core column within your diamond, enabling you to hold greater balance and emanate more light. It also provides for greater neuronal plasticity. You know, guys know what that means? It's the ability for your brain to create different patterns and pathways. Each manifestation or attribute, and this is interesting, has within it an additional polarization. In other words, there is a right time, right place to utilize every one of the characteristics on that list. And when this is recognized and appropriately utilized, it leads to increased frequency, connection, and unity. Inappropriately used, these attributes lead to lowered frequency, reduced connection to source, and reduced neuroplasticity. There are no bad characteristics, only misguided and incorrectly used forces. Mastering the attributes means to use them at the right time, right place, always, as this supports our elevation into unity consciousness. This was a discipline of the ancient mystery school initiates, and this is a discipline that will support us in reunifying our being physically and emotionally so that we can adapt our way forward with the ninth wave. So if we consider that every single one, now I've got another little chart here working with the 12 attributes, every single one of these things actually has a positive and a negative characteristic. So there will be times when being silent can actually lend itself to enhancing or increased frequencies. That's really what we're talking about. And there are times when being silent would lower your frequency. Can you guys think of any time when being silent would lower your frequency? Elizabeth's saying, can you see the chart now, Elizabeth? Can you guys see this on the screen? You can't see it. Oh, okay. Okay, oh, it's a new share. Okay, hold on. So I just read that stuff out to you. Now I need to share this. Share. Can you see it now? You can. Thank you. Okay, thanks for telling me. I didn't realize that that was one of the things I needed to do. Thank you. Okay, so being silent. Yes. So being silent when it's inappropriate would be, someone's just said they're not sticking up for yourself. Absolutely. So being silent, what's that going to do? It's going to lower your vibration. Being silent when somebody is perhaps being harmed or in danger, is in some way in danger, and you don't speak up for them on their behalf, is a lowering of your frequency. Positive, high frequency vibes in respect of being silent could be being in prayer, being silent in prayer. You got it? Or giving a blessing, or doing a healing. So being silent at the appropriate time is an increased frequency gift. Speaking at the appropriate time is then a manifestation of being confident and of being able to communicate what's actually happening within you. So speaking when appropriate enhances and increases your frequency. Speaking when not appropriate, where it would actually lead to reduced frequency, would be something like gossiping or interrupting. Or there's a lot of things that I'm sure you can think of, but you see how this works. So our challenge is to know in every single moment which attribute and which polarization of that attribute to use. So being receptive, there are times when being receptive will be advantageous. And there are times when being receptive will be not. Okay, I'm probably frying your brain here. What have we got? Something in the chat room? Becoming very present and aware of our energy. Thank you, Rachel. This is exactly what it is in every moment, but it's a discernment process. Resistance to influence. So resistance to influence would be, I'll give you a couple of examples when I send you the document. Resistance to influence in its high frequency manifestation would be something like if somebody is actually trying to bully or manipulate you. Now think about our current society and how much we are being influenced by the marketers, by social media, blah, 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 and so on and so on. You can actually list them forever. So times when resistance to influence does not serve. Can you guys think of anything there? Oh, this is interesting. I was receptive for some and not for others. Yes. Yes, thank you, Serge. That's exactly it. This is so close to Leslie Temple Thurston's work on polarities. Oh, I love it. Must go. Okay, Bunny, love you. Thank you so much for being here. You get the gist, and I'll send you through the documents. Oh, that's very interesting. That with Leslie Temple Thurston is an amazing, amazing teacher, which is with a spiritual teacher, which is obviously why she works with us. Bye, Bunny. Okay, so it's really important for us to be aware of. When would we not want to resist influence? Or when would it be, yeah, sort of negative, low vibration to resist influence? We wouldn't want to resist influence if it is part of our divine calling, if it is part of our soul, and part of us letting opportunities pass by. Yes, absolutely. You'll see actually going through these that there are numerous opportunities to pride. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah. Pride comes before a fall, so they say, yeah. So that's been, in fact, you'll find that pride will come in, I think, further down in this self-confidence thing. So self-confidence, when it manifests as a low frequency manifestation, would be like boasting, boastfulness, steeped in ego, false pride. Obeying and ruling. Obeying is also the same. When would it be a low frequency manifestation to obey? If somebody's actually trying to bully you and you capitulate and you give your power over to them, then that's not good. But when is it good to obey? When you have a higher authority, and I'm talking spiritual authority, that is actually providing some guidance in order to be able to manifest and raise your frequency. And then it's becoming and adhering to the disciplines, obeying the disciplines that are actually required to do that. Do you guys get the gist of this? I've left this blank so that you can start working with it, because there are general ideas. Then there are many, many layers to this exercise. So it's a layer that you can look at just from a general understanding. Then I want you to look at this from the perspective of how these attributes play in your own life. What is your tendency? Is it your tendency to fall back into the low frequency manifestation of that attribute or quality? And then what can you do about it? Or is it your tendency to actually work with the increased one? That's why I said have a look at what your triggers were in the very beginning, because that will give you a guideline. So that's the second layer, is to look at your life in respect of these attributes. What can be strengthened? What do you need to be aware of? Oh, yeah, there we go. So it says obeying yes when it comes from inner intuition. So you need to obey your intuition. Absolutely. I think sometimes not believing or listening to ourselves can create a situation where we can be influenced by. Absolutely. Of course it is. And that's not having confidence. So I'll give you a guideline with these. And so those are the two layers. There's the general one, understanding. The second one is how they work in your life. And then the third one I wanted you to have a go with was to work with the spirals back through the waves and see which of these attributes are present on your spirals of time on your way back through the waves. What sits in there positively? What sits in there that is challenging you being able to raise your frequency? And then what healing can you bring into awareness? So just make a few notes. So now we really start doing the work in respect of strengthening our ability to connect with and to maintain connected with source and the ninth wave, and healing the previous waves. Does that make sense, guys? You guys happy with that? I've got a few things. So it's a very deep process. Yes, and there's quite a bit of work. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Okay, well, having done that, I know we've gone nearly 2.5 hours, and I just want to thank you all so much for your patience, for your attendance, I hope I haven't fried your brain. Is there anything that you would like to share with us before we switch off for this evening? And then I'll get the document out to you by probably tomorrow. It's supper time. Let's have a look at the comments in the chat room. Thanks to you. Thank you, Serge. Thank you for trusting. Was it Rachel says, yes, my brain is boiled and mashed. Yes. Good information. Oh, bless you. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm glad you guys are really enjoying it. Yeah, boiled and mashed. And then it will start really consolidating as we go through the subsequent waves, because there's quite a bit of work that we can then deepen through subsequent waves. So I hope that you've enjoyed that. Thank you for staying with me through this session. And Rachel says, I absolutely love this. It feels perfectly timed. Bless you. Thank you. That's fantastic. That's really, really wonderful to hear. And I will go and adjust the dates on the website, and we will connect again in 2 weeks. So you've got quite a bit to do with this over the next 2 weeks. I hope you'll enjoy it. It's a very insightful, wonderfully self-insightful process that is filled with aha moments. Because I'll tell you one thing just before I check off. When I looked down here, I looked at this, which is the ability to fight, and how many people really think that fighting has a positive quality or aspect to it, and how many of us revert to passiveness and peace in the face of an onslaught that we are dealing with at the moment. So having the ability to fight for what we understand deeply as a divine cause is a frequency enhancing activity. Really important. So I think there's some things that we can use to adjust our behavior. All of this is divine. Looking forward to see where the divine fits in. Need to steep in it for a while. Yes, absolutely. Bye to all. Have a good time, everyone. Thank you all. Love you. Term warrior. Yeah. We're going to work with this. Okay. So open to questions, open to anything. If you guys want to email me in the meantime, I'm going to stop the recording and say thank you all for being here.